Oh, not yet. Hopefully this will go okay. It's only my second one in a very, very long time since I've done a live. So let's see, folks. Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Audit Committee meeting of 3rd of March, 2021. Welcome to members of the press and the public watching the meeting live. I'm Councillor Jennifer Miller-Smith and I'm chair of the Audit Committee. This is a meeting held in public and not a public meeting. There will be no public question time at any council meeting while virtual committee meetings are being held. The public and press can still hear and see the meeting, but the public speaking has been suspended and any written questions submitted in advance that were deemed acceptable by the council's monitoring officer will be read out as answered. There will be no supplementary questions. The agenda for this meeting is published and available on the council's website. For any committee meeting held virtually, all voting will be held via recorded vote taken by a Democratic Services team member on behalf of the chair, whereby individual councillors will be asked at the end of the debate to state if they are for, against, or if they wish to abstain for the recommendation before them at that time. The exceptions to this are the approving of the minutes from the previous meeting or any other procedural item, or where the item's sole recommendation to a committee is to note the reports. For those items, the chair will move the item, seconded by the vice chair, and it will be presumed agreed unless a dissenting comment from any committee member is made. May I ask the Democratic Services officers producing this meeting to introduce herself.
I'm Heather Girling. I'm Democratic Services Officer.
Before I invite members of the committee to confirm their attendance, I ask that they please ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or on silence. Their backgrounds are set to a generic office background and they are aware of their surroundings so they are not disturbed during their meeting. This includes making sure all TVs, radios, and smart speakers are switched off. Committee members are reminded that they should have their microphones turned off unless speaking and their cameras turned off unless they're requesting to speak. That's how we'll know that you want to come in. When asked to speak, please turn your camera on, unmute yourselves, and pause for 3 seconds to allow for the slight time delay in connection. Please bear in mind that you're only live when your image is surrounded by a red box. With this in mind, committee members are asked to be aware of who they will follow in the voting process and prepare accordingly. So we move first to apologies for absence, and we have no apologies for absence have been received for tonight's meeting. Next item is disclosures of interests and minutes. That's items 2 and 3. And we're going to take those two together. So please may I ask committee members, when called upon, to confirm their name, the ward they represent, if they have any declarations of interest to make, if they agree with the minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee held on 22nd of September 2020.
Yes, Chair. Let me just redo the introductions as I believe I was muted. Heather Girling, Democratic Services Officer. And we also have Ms Matthews, Democratic Services Officer, supporting the meeting. I will now call each committee member to answer in alphabetical order. And we'll start with Councillor Belbin, please.
Good evening. Councillor Tina Belbin, representing Pound Hill North and Forge Wood. I have no declarations of interest and I approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Flack.
Hi, I'm Morgan Flack. I'm one of the councillors for Southgate. I also have no declarations of interest and I approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Jones.
Hello there, my name's Councillor Michael Jones. I'm councillor for Bubush and Broadfield North. I have no declarations of interest to make, and I agree with the minutes of the last meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Miller-Smith.
Hi, I'm Councillor Jennifer Miller-Smith. I represent Maidenbower Ward. I'm obviously the chair of the Audit Committee. I have no declarations of interest to report, and I approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Councillor Purdy.
Good evening, Jonathan Purdy representing Three Bridges and the Town Centre. I have no declarations of interest to make, and I approve the minutes as a correct record of the Audit Committee meeting held on 22nd of September 2020. Thank you.
And just for record purposes, Councillor Barrett is also present in the meeting but has no speaking rights. We also have officer-wise, we have Natalie Brahma-Pearl, Chief Executive of the Council, Karen Hayes, Head of Corporate Finance, Chris Corker, Operational Benefits and Corporate Fraud Manager, Gillian Edwards, Audit and Risk Manager, and Andrew Britton, Associate Partner for Ernst & Young, are also present in the meeting, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the committee agrees that the minutes of the meeting of the Audit Committee held on 22nd of September 2020 are an accurate record of the meeting, and we can move on to the next item, which is public question time. We have a little out of order. There's no written questions that have been received for this meeting. Can I also just note, I meant to do it, Councillor Flack, the Vice Chair of the committee is Councillor Morgan Flack, who's obviously present this evening. Now we have the Fraud and Investigation Team reports, and if we have the consideration of the report with Chris Corker, the Operational Benefits and Corporate Fraud Manager, please present the report to the committee.
Good evening, everybody. This report describes the activities of the Corporate Fraud Investigation Team for the period the 1st of April 2020 to the 16th of February 2021, and I ask that the committee notes the report. This report is somewhat different in that normally I present this report quarterly, but due to last year's events, I'm actually reporting, this is the first report to you for some time, and it starts from the 1st of April 2020. Now, during the pandemic that started last year, the team had to look at new threats that were being received by the council, specifically in the areas of business grants. So a lot of the work that the team have undertaken this year has been towards looking at business grants. Now, at the beginning of March 2020, 3 main grants were set up: small business grants, retail, hospitality, leisure grants, and discretionary grants. The investigation team were able at very short notice to set up a working way of giving prepayment assurance on every application using the tools that they had available to them at the time. So this involved checking every application that came into the council. In total, they checked 975 cases, which had a total value of just over, well, almost £13.5 million. We are now starting to look at post-assurance checks regarding these payments, and we are, as I said, we are just starting this work now, and we will be uploading a lot of the data that we now have to the National Fraud Initiative for post-data matching. There has been around nationally a lot of concern about payments that may have been applied for incorrectly or fraudulently, so now we are starting to look at those. Currently, we now have in the region of 23 different schemes, which the team are also assisting with pre and post assurance checking as and when those cases are highlighted to us. As well as the considerable work that we put into business grants, we haven't stopped looking at the normal cases that have routinely come through us day by day. And you can see in section 6 the type of cases that we generally have open at the moment, and we've got 39 cases currently open, many of those being housing cases, which leads me on to 6.1 housing fraud, where within the period that I've mentioned, we've recovered 10 properties back into Crawley Borough Council use. These are properties that haven't been the right person isn't at the property, or they've been misused in a certain way, and our tenant isn't present. So we have managed to recover those properties. We've prevented 5 properties being issued incorrectly to in relation to applicants for housing that have come into Crawley, where either the applications were incorrect or the information was misleading. We've stopped five cases going forward, and we've stopped 1 right to buy. Now, normally we would have stopped a lot more right to buys during the year, but during how we've been working and the way that things have operated, we haven't been able to actually get out and see the properties as we would do normally. So I've listed there notionally that our savings from housing operations have been £352,000, and below I show how we work that out, with each case that we recover roughly being worth to us £18,000 a year, because the cost that the council would incur by putting people up in other accommodation. 6.2, I list the details that we have with regard to the single person discount. Now, we're constantly looking at properties where someone has made an application to have a 25% discount, and where in fact there are actually 2 adults resident in a property. Normally once a year we do a review, a single person discount review, where we data match all the residents in our property to highlight where data suggests there are actually 2 adults resident in the property. That hasn't yet been done for this financial year, again because of the other work that we've been doing. So normally we would have a lot more than 15 discounts removed during the year. And then in 6.3, I do list the work that the council tax inspectors have been doing with relation to looking at council tax and non-domestic rates, where they find businesses and premises where the bill needs to be put into place or is not quite accurate at that time. So they go around reviewing who's in what premises and actually updating and revising the correct bill for them. In number 7, we've had 2 prosecutions of note during the period that I'm reporting. One is a council tax support claim where the person declared they had minimal capital. However, if you have capital over a set threshold, you're not entitled to any support with your council tax liability. This person in particular had £35,000 in their bank account and had not declared that. Had the true facts been known, then they wouldn't have received any assistance with their council tax bill, and they pleaded guilty and were fined by the court. In addition, we also had a littering case whereby the reason why this one came to light within the team is because when the fixed penalty notice was issued, it was returned back to the council as not living at this address. We were able to track down the person and identify who they were, and we were able then to discuss the matter with them, and we could prove it in court that they'd actually given us false details to the warden that issued them the tickets. And again, they pleaded guilty in court under offence under the Environmental Protection Act, and she was ordered to pay costs. And that is my report, unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. I'll now open the debate. Please turn your camera on if you wish to speak, and you'll be brought in. Please also unmute your microphone and check that you're live before you're making your comments, pausing for 3 seconds to allow for the time delay. Do we have any questions? Councillor Belbin.
Yep, Councillor Belbin.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for your report. You've obviously been working very hard on the business grants, and you say that you haven't concluded as many cases as you normally do, but you have in fact got quite a lot, 39 that are open at the moment under item 6, the table in item 6. You've got 39 cases there. Any idea of the value of those open cases, or please?
Yeah.
Or is that, how long is a piece of string?
To some degree, it could be that. It depends what type of case we are looking at, and we prioritise the cases obviously where it has the most impact on our funds. And as you can see, probably the most cases that we have are housing cases where there's potentially a significant loss if we don't have the right tenant in our property. So those cases, on average, we could say they could be worth up to £18,000. So they are probably why we've got more of those cases. But yes, 39 is still a large number to be investigating. But I can't give you an overall value of the figures because until a case is concluded, we don't know if there's an issue there. Or how much that is actually worth at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. I was just making the point that although you say you haven't concluded as many cases as normal, you've still got quite a few open ones. So you've obviously been working very hard this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on this report? So go ahead and turn your camera on. No? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I just wanted to definitely, I'm sure, add all of the committee's thanks for this report. You clearly are working very hard, especially considering the extra work with the business grants. And we'll wait and see what happens with the current sort of cases that are open. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so we will move on to the recommendations as set out in the report. I move that the committee receive the report and note progress to date, and I ask that the vice chair seconds.
I formally second the moving.
Okay. Please indicate now if you are not in agreement. Turning your camera on, something. No. Okay. All right. So this report has been noted, and again, thank you very much for that. We now move on to the progress report and risk management. Would Gillian Edwards, our audit and risk manager, please present the report to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Since the last meeting and as up to the 19th of February, we've completed 5 audits, 4 of which we've provided an overall assurance of satisfactory or substantial. You'll see that we've provided one audit opinion of no assurance, which is very, very unusual. Throughout the year, I've also attended the Corporate Project Assurance Group, and other members of my team have attended the Town Hall Board, Information Management Project Board and the Governance Group. Attendance at the Corporate Project Assurance Group gives me an overview of the main projects, the high profile projects, capital and revenue that the Council are undertaking, which allows me to form an opinion on the management, risk management and the governance arrangements. Being involved in the information governance audit also allows me to provide and feed into my head of audit assurance opinion at the year end. Since Samaria Brown left, Head of Legal and Democratic Services and HR last year, I've taken over the review of subject access requests to make sure that they're compiled in line with subject access request guidance and the Data Protection Act, and to make sure that they get sent out appropriately, fully, completely, in line with all the legislation. I'm also responsible in the first instance for investigating any data breaches, of which we've had probably 5 or 6 since we last met, nothing that was reportable to the ICO, and mainly down to human error. With regards to work in progress, that's shown in Appendix A, and I'll come back to that a little bit further on in the report. I mentioned just now that we identified an audit with a number of high priority findings. This is a car parking visitor parking permits audit, and we actually identified 10 high priority findings and 1 medium priority. This audit was undertaken at the request of the head of finance because the number of daily permits, the SPDs as they're referred to in the car parking section, increased once we came out of lockdown and staff were required to start paying to park again at the town hall. Prior to this, most people who parked at the town hall
purchased an annual or a monthly season ticket, for a small amount of time, parking was free at the town hall, but charges were introduced from June onwards. This increased the number of these daily tickets that people purchased because people were just coming in occasionally, maybe once or twice a week. And the cost of a single ticket is £2.50, or you can buy a book of permits for £25. In consultation with the head of corporate finance, we thought that this was an area that probably could do with some attention due to the increase in the number of tickets. My opinion overall is that the record keeping in this area of the ordering, recording of stock, issue of stock, sales of stock and how stock is held is poor. Based on the records, which were incomplete, but the best records we could put together ourselves, we've ascertained that 5,533 daily tickets are unaccounted for. By unaccounted for, I mean not held in stock and not recorded as sold on the cash receipting system. This equates to a total of £13,832.50. We've discussed the findings with management and we've agreed ways to improve the system, and we're working with them closely to ensure that they've got the support they need in order to do this. This is based upon new spreadsheets, holding the stock more securely, accounting for when a ticket's sold and who it's sold to. We will come back to you in July to tell you how the system's going and what improvements have been made. We haven't done any follow-up audits in this period. And with regards to freedom of information requests, we've had 355 in the period and 23 were responded to late. Looking back, this is not significantly higher than the same period last year. It just feels like it, I think. A number of these have been about grants or COVID, which is obviously topical and we would expect. Corporate risks were discussed recently at CMT, and there's no significant difference from the last time that we reported to you. And if we could just direct you to, Appendix A on page 29, this is work in progress. We've now started all but one of our audits, and these will be complete by the year end. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian, for the report. Obviously been very busy. I want to open this for debate now. If you could please turn your camera on if you wish to speak and you'll be brought in. I'm sure we have some questions about some of this.
Yep, Councillor Purdy.
Good evening again. Obviously, I imagine I will echo the feelings of the members of the committee, having reviewed your report on the car parking audit as being disappointed, particularly as I'm a new member of the committee, and this is my second meeting. The first meeting we had last September, obviously we took the 2019-2020 report, which sort of said that overall there was a general opinion that there was substantial assurance across the council that internal controls were sound and being complied with and working consistently. And I was assured by other members of the committee when I had the presumption to suggest perhaps we ought to be looking in more detail at things, to say that no, everything was working very well and officers were well in control. Obviously, the car parking piece brings us to a place of disappointment, where we seem to have mislaid nearly £14,000 worth of parking tickets. A couple of questions, really. Obviously, you've done no follow-up on that. I will be interested to see the follow-up on that and whether that the improvements are being met with there. Has any disciplinary action been mooted against any members of the employees of the council? in that respect, just as a general question. And then my second question is more specific. It's around the work, the reference to work with Mid Sussex, which I believe, and on my reading of this is my understanding, and I wanted to confirm this, is the fact that we were doing work for them and we will no longer be doing so, not the other way around. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to your first question, Councillor Purdy, in relation to disciplinary action being mooted against any individual, I'm unfortunately unable to answer that question. And with regards to your second question about Mid Sussex District Council, we have provided a shared service for them, and a shared audit service for the past 7 years, and it's us that have withdrawn from the arrangement.
Thank you very much.
Before we bring Councillor Belbin in, I wanted to say something else about this. I think that Councillor Purdy referencing back to the report, the 2019-2020 reports at the last meeting. I mean, this is something that has come, I think, to light more, recently, is my understanding. I don't know if Gillian can confirm. So at the time we had those assurances, I think the specifics of the current lockdown situation flagged that. I agree, it's extremely unfortunate, but it also at least has been sort of came to light that just to sort of see what's happening with this, because there's a change given the change in the amount of people coming, how people access the town hall, that it brought it to light. So I think, although it's disappointing to see that we found something that needs to be investigated and more robust systems in place, I do think that actually audit and risk should be congratulated, finance generally should be congratulated on just kind of subtly realizing that something needed to be investigated and pulling that up. I also understand that hopefully we will get further information as you put in new systems in place. You will come back to the committee with how those new systems are working so that we can have assurance that the new systems in place are indeed more robust. Is that you will come back to us with a follow-up to this? Is that correct for the car parking?
Yes, we'll come back to you in July. Some of the recommendations that have been agreed aren't due to be implemented just yet, but probably by the end of April they are due to be implemented, and we'd like them to run for 2 or 3 months just to make sure that they're actually mitigating the risks that we've identified.
Okay, thank you. So move on to Councillor Belbin.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Does your report actually include the members' oversight, or are we moving on to that, please? I have a couple of comments on the members. It's still agenda item 6, but page 19 of the report is this reporting. It says here, reporting as requested to OSC on presumably the town hall, etc. And we did have a special meeting on the town hall in September 17, and the OSC chair then did say that she wanted regular reports, but OSC doesn't seem to very often get reports of the financials on the town hall. I know that's not really perhaps your bag, but I've also got another comment on the 26. For some reason, it says that with regard to the climate scrutiny panel, that unfortunately they weren't able to make an assessment because it was significantly delayed due to the pandemic. And yet I think the climate scrutiny panel met all throughout the summer, and in fact, did an awful lot of work. Is that part of your report? Page 26, please. Could you comment on that? I don't know why people would think that that report was delayed because of the pandemic, because I think they had about 7 or 8 meetings.
Sorry, Councillor Belvin.
I'd like. Could I pass this over to Karen Hayes, please?
Okay, of course.
Good evening, Karen Hayes, Head of Corporate Finance. This risk was updated by Clem Smith, the Head of Service responsible for this, but it says it was delayed because it was meant to come to you before the February Overview and Scrutiny Commission, and that's the only reason it says it's delayed. They were hoping to get it there earlier.
You're on mute, Councillor Belvin.
Yes, sorry. Yes, it was just such a comprehensive report and detail. They'd obviously done a lot of work, and I didn't want people to think that they hadn't had meetings during the pandemic when they had done. Thank you.
I just want to ask a quick, if you excuse me for just 1 minute, I just want to ask a quick technical question about Councillor Belvin's other question about OSC. So I'm just going to mute myself for a second. Okay, so just to clarify, I think a bit more probably is OSC, Councillor Belvin, for your question around OSC, they can have financial reports. So, you know, if they so request, so that takes care of that one. Right, is there anyone else who had a question or wanted to speak on any other part of this report? No. So we'll say that all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so we'll move on to the recommendations as set out in the report. I move that the committee receive the report and note progress to date, and I ask that the Vice Chair second, please.
I second this. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you please indicate now if anyone's not in agreement? No? Okay. Thank you. So the report has been noted. Thank you very much, Jillian, for that. We look forward to having some follow-up information at our next meeting. We move on now to the internal audit plan 2021-2022. And Jillian, again, please, our audit and risk manager, to present the report to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. This internal audit report, audit plan for the forthcoming financial year has been, as always, put together in collaboration with Karen Hayes as Head of Corporate Finance and Section 151 Officer and CMT. It gives a broad coverage across all of the divisions, as always. Covering the fundamental systems, projects, capital and revenue, and other areas that we consider to be appropriate for coverage. As always, it's a fluid plan. If something comes in which is deemed to be a higher priority or a higher risk, we can move something out or we can take on additional days in consultation with the Section 151 officer. We have a small number of days set aside for contingency, but we've also got some COVID related contingency time this year, and that's possibly going to be looking further at the grants that are being paid out at the moment and some post assurance work that we'd be working on with the fraud and investigations team. I'll be very happy to take any questions on this audit plan for next year. Thank you.
I'll now open up the audit plan to committee members, please, to ask any questions. And it doesn't look like we really have any questions. Oh, great. There we go. I do have something else I was going to say, but that's you. So you go ahead first, Tina. Councillor Belvin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. We have 12 days allocated for ICT, which I'm quite pleased to see, and it's just to be agreed, because of course we are going to be spending a lot of money moving to the cloud, etc. Is that what you envisage you're going to be looking at, please? You've got 12 days there that you sort of got budgeted, and at the side you've got to be agreed. I just wondered what you were thinking you're going to be looking at on ICT.
Thank you, Chair. At the beginning of every financial year, I will sit with the, maybe remotely this year, head of ICT, Simon Jones, and do a mini risk assessment of the areas. So we'll get hold of their forward plan for their work and look at anything that's topical. So we haven't actually decided what that will cover just yet, but this will also be agreed with the Section 151 officer. And I can bring this back to you in July to tell you exactly what we intend to cover.
Great, thank you. Is this obviously the move to the cloud is going to cost us a lot of money, and also there's a lot of other changes in our way we work that's going to be costing a lot of money, and I think it's important that we keep our finger on the pulse this time, rather than costs escalate with the data migration that happened a couple of years ago, for instance. Thank you. I'm pleased to see it down there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And also just to say, I know that we've got 10 contingency days, but we've got 16 ad hoc COVID-related contingency days, which is likely to actually be, if we have, if anything's going to arise, that's where it is. But so between those areas, we have quite a bit of time built in for COVID related things, which hopefully we're going to begin to start seeing less of. Right, and so if no other committee members want to speak, then no, I don't see anyone else's meeting. We'll move on to the recommendation as set out in the report, please. I move that the committee note the 2021-2022 annual internal audit plan, and I ask that the vice chair second, please.
I second the noting of the 2021-2022 audit plan.
Thank you. And can any committee members note now if they are not in agreement? Okay, so the annual internal audit plan 2021-2022 has been noted. Thank you again, Jillian.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to the updated audit results report, year ended 31st of March 2020. Finally, we will now consider the updated audit results reports for the year ended 31st of March 2020. And would Andrew Britton, please, the associate partner for Ernst & Young, please present the report to the committee, and welcome to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as a brief introduction to this one, this is obviously, well, as has already been reflected on in this meeting, it's been an unusual year, and this report is predominantly the same report as we brought to the September committee, with a few specific changes, which I will highlight as we go through. So if I could ask members to turn to page 49 of the pack, in terms of the executive summary, as a reminder, as I said, the impact of COVID-19 was obviously significant for all of us. In terms of the audit, it impacted both in terms of the logistics of completing the audit, but also the issues that it highlighted. And as we've captured there in the first two bullets, specifically the impact it had on property valuations and on the disclosures contained within the accounts relating to going concern and the impact of COVID-19. As was indicated at the last meeting, we had a number of outstanding items which required additional work to clarify either the differences that we had identified and/or the adjustments that were needed to the wording in the accounts. So if I ask members just to, as I say, I'll just go to the bits that have changed since the last time we met. If we go to page 51, you will see outlined on page 51 section of audit differences. Those are the differences that we are required to report to you that we've identified during the course of the audit, and those differences captured there remain unadjusted in the final set of statements, which, as was mentioned earlier, are in the process of being signed. The pension fund ones we talked about at the last meeting, so I won't go over those again, but I did want to spend a little bit more time explaining those relating to property valuation. So if you turn to page 58 of the pack, that shows in a little bit more detail our conclusions of our work on property valuation. Just as by way of context for property valuation within and I guess the audit of property valuation. So in the normal course of an audit, obviously management and the finance team would pull together the accounts. They would in some cases have to make some judgments over the numbers that were put into those accounts, and as auditors we then seek evidence to support the assertion that, for instance, the debtor's balance is correctly shown in within the confines of materiality. Now clearly the finance team are perfectly capable of valuing and estimating the value of the debtors at a point in time, the balance sheet date, and as auditors, we're part of our training enables us to challenge those estimates and the assessments of those values. When we come on to something like property valuation, that is a very specialised and individual set of skills, and so the council employ a set of valuers in order to value the properties, both the land and buildings contained within the property, plant and equipment balance, and also the investment property that the council holds. In terms of relying on their report, they then take the report, challenge the assumptions that underpin it, and then obviously incorporate that into the accounts. We, as the auditors, again, recognising that's a specialist area, we also use our own specialists to look at and into the values that that are captured within the accounts, and look at the report that the valuers have provided to the council. WHE, who provide the valuations for the council this year, because of clearly the escalating COVID pandemic at the point of valuation, i.e. 31st of March, put what's referred to as a material uncertainty clause in their report. The combination of that and obviously the uncertainty in the environment at the 31st of March anyway, from our perspective, increases the risk around property valuation. And as we flagged to you last time, we looked at that in more detail and looked at a greater number of properties that have been valued within the balance sheet. Our findings were in the main that we were able to rely on the work that WHE had done, but there were a few instances where we identified differences. Now, we appreciate that the valuation of property is an estimation. However, we still need to be comfortable with the underlying assumptions. So the three that you can see mentioned there, so the first of which is the Bubush Centre, which some of you may be familiar with. When we looked at the assumptions that WHE had used, we thought that the cost per square foot in terms of the replacement cost was higher, and for instance we would expect valuers to place an element of obsolescence into their calculations. So in this case, WHE used an obsolescence rate of 5%. We believe that for a building that is about 10 years old, 5%, I mean, if you did the maths on a straight line basis, that would mean it would last about 200 years. We thought it probably should be a little bit higher in terms of the obsolescence rate. So when we worked those calculations through, as you can see, we came up with a difference between what the valuers had valued it at and what we believe was a reasonable value. However, that difference is not material, and therefore, when we discussed it with management, although there was a possibility of adjusting it, they decided not to adjust it, and because it's not material, we're happy to accept that as a basis for keeping it unadjusted. So the same principle applies to Ashdown House and Atlantic House because they're investment properties, not property, plant and equipment. The valuation basis is slightly different. One of the things we identified here was that WHE had not built in an allowance for gaps in income streams in the future, for instance, when it needs to be relet or incentives for reletting. So that made a difference in terms of the calculation. As you can see, the difference was slightly bigger on Ashdown House than it was on Atlantic House, and that's simply because Ashdown House has or at the time had a shorter lease period still to run. So again, that threw up some differences, but given their values are below our materiality thresholds, after discussion it was decided that they wouldn't be adjusted, and we're happy to accept that in the context of the IP balance. So I just wanted to explain that in a bit more detail because I appreciate that that was one of the outstanding items when we met last, and it is something that takes some time to get to the bottom of, because clearly this is a judgmental area as the values of property are by their nature estimations. The other area that we still had to conclude on when we spoke with you last was around the disclosures on going concern and the impact of COVID-19. So if I ask people to turn to page 61. So as previously mentioned, the uncertainty in relation to COVID-19 meant the challenge around, or the robustness of management's assessment around going concern. So any set of accounts, by way of explanation, any set of accounts that get presented for audit have excuse me, are prepared on a going concern basis, and management have to perform an assessment to underpin that. So we look at the assessment, and that's from both a funding and a liquidity perspective, and we consider therefore both levels of reserves and levels of forecast cash flow. And also because of the highly unusual set of circumstances that we were in relation to COVID-19, we also went through additional consultations internally. So all opinions issued by EY in the last year have had to go through additional consultation to make sure that the disclosures adequately disclose the impact of COVID-19 on individual entities. And so as a result of that and discussion with management, we did update, or sorry, management updated some of the commentary within the narrative statement and the going concern note within the notes to the accounts. So Chair, those are the differences since we presented the report last time, so I'm happy to take any questions on that basis.
Okay, thank you. I think the other thing, I didn't think you'd mentioned it, but we also had the sort of pension work completed. Did I miss that? I'm sorry, I'm reading everything else. I'm thinking ahead all the time. Sorry. Okay. So that was done. I thought you did mention it briefly.
Yeah.
I was busy thinking about all the evaluations and stuff. Yeah. So that is done.
The pensions work had been completed, and we had identified again a number of errors which again, by the time you added them all together, were below the levels of materiality.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. It all starts to run together, I think, when we kept talking about the several things. All right, thank you very much for that. I'm now going to open up to committee for any questions. If you please turn your camera on if you would like to speak or you have any questions, particularly around some of the new information that we've received. Please indicate now. Okay, I think that's fine. I think Councillor Flack.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for all the work that you guys have done on this. It's really appreciated. I was just wondering if I could quickly check something on page 58. I'm not sure if I've misunderstood, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I've got it wrong. I thought that the overstatement for Ashdown House was 1,675, but here it's 1.675 million. Can I just check which figure it is, please?
It's 1.675 million for Ashdown House, 230,000 for Atlantic House, which obviously is just under 2 million. Our performance materiality, so the threshold at which above which if we would expect errors to be adjusted is 2.2 million. And so that's clearly just below. As it says there, we did discuss adjusting it with management, and when we came to the conclusion that having not adjusted it, we were comfortable that the basis for not adjusting was reasonable.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for clarifying. Just to come back on that then, page 51, I think there's an error because it says it's 1,675,000. And I think that ideally would be corrected, please.
It does say
Okay.
that now.
No. It's the difference between a full stop and a comma. So sorry, change in nomenclature. So on page 51, it's 1,675k. So 1,675,000. Right. So 1.675 million.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you.
That's all right.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. Okay, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Britton. Not really a question, rather an observation. Looking at page 82 and the proposed fee variation, and I'm sorry to sound like a broken record because I do believe I made this point last time. Changes in scope, I understand, need to be debated. But your inability to deliver to your expected budget shouldn't be a reason for increasing the fees to ourselves. And I do appreciate that that's got to go up through PSAA, and so may come back with a different view, but that's certainly my view. A much smaller number than the one we've just been talking about with Councillor Flack, but nevertheless one that this council I don't believe should need to pay. Thank you very much. I don't need a response per se, that's just an observation.
Thank you. I'm not live yet, am I? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Purdy. And actually, yes, I mean, that is something that we addressed at the last meeting, and I did actually write on this, and I have taken, as has our head of finance, I believe as well, at the same time, we've taken every opportunity to have discussions and express our feelings about this to PSAA. And indeed, I think there's more that we can do around, perhaps not this particular case. We've expressed our displeasure at the way that has worked. But certainly I am keen to find a way for us to bring this in a variety of ways to a higher level of just about how audit is functioning generally for councils. So we can talk more about that another time, but just wanted to add that for Councillor Purdy. Thank you very much. I don't know if, I think we're satisfied as a committee with what has been included, at least. I do just want to ask if our head of finance had anything to add for the committee's benefits. If not, that's fine. But go ahead and turn your camera on if you do. No? No. Okay, fine. All right. Well, thank you very much. So all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so we'll move on. The recommendation is set out in the agenda. I move that the committee receive and note the updated audit results report for the year ended 31st of March 2020, and I ask that the vice chair please second.
I second this noting.
Please indicate now if you're not in agreement. The updated audit results report for the year ended 31st of March 2020 has been noted. Thank you very much. There is no supplementary agenda for this meeting, so we shall move on to agenda item 10, which is exempt. We closed. Okay, the committee is asked to consider. Oh no, we need to close it. Okay, fine. The committee is asked to consider passing the following resolution: that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraph specified against the item. Please indicate now if you're not in agreement. What this means in practice is that we are now going to exempt session for the discussion on agenda item 11, outcome of the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office RIPA inspection. The live feed will end shortly, so thank you to the public for watching this part of the committee meeting. We will, members of the committee and relevant officers, please ensure you use the link, the other link, sent to you for this meeting to access the exempt Part B item. If you're unable to connect using the link, you'll be dialed in by an officer. We will restart the exempt session in a couple of minutes' time. And thank you for others who are attending and your contributions.